Hey friends, welcome back to Business as Unusual. In today's episode, my friend and colleague, Carmell Clark, took on the role of host and interviewed me about my work with Bicurean. It was fun and a little strange to be on the other side of the microphone of my own show. We dive into how I'm working to redefine business with alignment, community, and a whole lot of heart. Get ready for some real talk about turning passion into impact.
Business as Unusual is a thought-provoking podcast that explores the innovative strategies, disruptive ideas, and unconventional practices driving successful leaders and companies in the ever-evolving world of modern business. Subscribe, comment, and share for weekly inspiration with our host, Aicila.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Business as Unusual. I just want to say right now we're doing things a little bit different. My name is Carmell Clark, and I am here today interviewing my dear friend and longtime colleague, Aicila Lewis. This is the podcast, Business as Unusual. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on today, Carmell.
This is so fun to have a little role reversal between us since you and I have done this the other way around a few times. But I really am so excited to do this with you and the idea for it between the two of us, because you need to be featured. There's so much that I want people to know about you, and you fit perfectly into Business as Unusual. Why don't you just tell us to begin with, if you would just share a little bit more about what your business is?
Thank you, Carmell. And thank you so much for taking on the role. I admit it, for me also, it's a little weird. I normally do the leading of the conversation, and it's also kind of neat to relax in and just let things go. My consulting company is called Bicurean, and I have been doing that for, I want to say 11 years, might be a little longer. And I work with creative entrepreneurs and innovators and thought leaders who are doing business as unusual. One of the services that I offer is what I call business cartography. And that is when I help folks map their business ecosystem. So everybody knows you need a roadmap. And my theory is that if you're out there doing your own thing, making something up that you're passionate about, you need more than just a roadmap. You need to understand the ecosystem and the geography that you are walking through and forging these new ways of doing business. That's one of the things that I do for folks. And then I have a few folks that I do strategic operations for in a more hands-on way. That's a limited list because it takes a lot of time and effort, and I love doing it. So part of the business cartography is very focused strategic and operational guidance, and sometimes a little tiny bit of hands-on. I just can't do as much hands-on for as many people as I would like to. I love it. I love working with people. I love seeing that aha moment. I love standing between them and all the messaging that tells them they have to be something or do something else, and that someone else is going to sell them the right way. I just don't believe that. I think they all have the right path. I don't know if they believe in a right path, but they have the path that's going to get them to where they want to go in the best way possible inside of their own wisdom. And they need to have the support in trusting themselves and in trusting their own process.
As an ethos in business, I think that's absolutely needed. And I have been the recipient of that for many years. So I have to say, as somebody who's experienced it, it has been completely business and life-changing for me, both. I'm going to mix those together, business and life-changing. It's quite a thing because I've been executive coaching for 24 years, and I've been working with entrepreneurs and professionals at all different levels in organizations for that time. It's interesting because I'm often having that conversation from the other side, telling people to trust themselves, and we work into their issues from this direction. With you, it's the same ethos. It's the same messaging, right? To walk in and say, I trust you, and let me see your business. Let's go inside and look at it, and then help you helped me, right? And that's what I see you do with others. Help us to see what we're doing more clearly and to trust that process that's within us, trust the vision and the direction that we have already built around. And as we do that, to be able to do it better, to be able to grow, to scale, to duplicate if that's needed. It's really extraordinary. What makes your business unusual or different?
So I mean, some of it is that what you're talking about, that ethos. I absolutely, I heard a woman say at an event several years ago, we need business models to fight business models. And that just really struck me, that the business community has often presented itself in a sort of a public and marketing way. And when I say business community presented itself, I don't mean any particular person. It's a set of PR tools and impressions and assumptions we all have that business is separate from life, and that the impacts of business are separate from the impacts of the other things that we're dealing with. And it's just not true. We are whole people living our lives and doing work. And I firmly believe that we will be happier, better people if we understand that we are a part of this world and we're interconnected. For example, when I measure business products and capacity with someone that I'm working with, I use what I call a value metric that includes, beyond time and money and other physical resources, it also includes inspiration, energy, emotional return, and community or relational return. And I'll get slightly technical here because I feel like it's important to kind of line it out. If you have a business that's all, say, emotion and inspiration return and no financial return, that's not going to work, because you do live in a society where you have to pay your bills. Right. And that does happen. People usually do the extremes. They either reject it completely or embrace it completely. Similarly, on the other side, a lot of business education and consulting and development really just talks about financial return. However, if everything you do is all about the financial return and it doesn't have any of the other types of relational and engagement, that also is really not going to last very long. You're going to get burned out. And you read these articles about people who wake up one day and like, I can't do it. My life is empty. And so my recommendation is that people have really a mix. You can have one thing that's all emotional energy and inspirational return, community return. You can have one thing that's all financial return, but the best is to have a good mix of products. And then everything is factored by time. Time is our most limited, most precious, and non-renewable resource. Right. So really have to look at, if it takes all of your time to do this and it has a high financial return, is it actually the best thing for it to be the only thing you're doing? Because eventually you do run out of time. That's the other piece of it, is really looking, once again, when I say the business ecosystem, looking at the whole picture and really including the things that matter, especially for people that are doing something that is a very small or solopreneur business or a passion or an innovation, because they're so much a part of it. And part of why they do it is they believe in it. But oftentimes it's because they want the freedom to enjoy life. And then they forget to enjoy life.
So true. I love that you have identified these other axes, right? Because they are ones that are so often missed in how we look at ourselves and look at our business. And as you said, life and business, we can't separate them out as many times we might want to. We need to look at them as part of the whole of ourselves, right? Especially as entrepreneurs. Otherwise, there's not that ability to stay connected to vision, for example, or there's not that ability to weather the really hard times that do inevitably come for entrepreneurs as we have businesses. We need to be able to have that resilience that comes from cultivating these other axes in our business besides just one axis or two axes, as you're laying out for us. And so I want to put a plug in here. I'm just going to shamelessly do this for a moment and say one of the specific axes of mine that you have really targeted is my need to have unstructured time. Like, I knew I needed to have unstructured time because that is part of my creative genius in the work that I do. And if I have everything too tightly scheduled, too tightly fit together, there isn't any of that breathing room of unstructured time, then I will go into a massive avoid pattern as an entrepreneur. And you observed that, you clocked it really well, and you knew exactly this is what we need to target to make sure that she has this right balance in her business and how we're approaching things, so that we can do the hard pushes. We can have even periods of time that are really tightly focused with not much breathing room, but then we have to map the breathing room into it at some point so that she has that balance, so she can keep going and she can stay involved and not turn tail and start heading the other direction, because this part of her needs to also have its time and place. So I think those are things that a lot of entrepreneurs don't talk about. We just kind of keep it behind the curtain and deal with things as they come up as best we can. And what you're saying and what I've watched you do is, no, I'm going to put that right front and center on the table. We're going to talk about it. We're going to recognize it. We're going to work with it, and we're going to work with it successfully. And I will, if I don't know how to do it when I start, I will figure it out pretty quickly. This is one of your genius areas, actually, Aicila. I will figure it out pretty quickly how to work with these particular parts of you and your axes so that you can get the very best and most successful results.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I'm glad, I mean, I did, when I started my business, I was very clear that for me, success was working with people that I respected, doing things I believed in ways that I felt competent. And so I also do have a very strong personal passion for the folks that I work with and the things that they're doing, and a real commitment to not seeing it diluted, which it puts me sometimes in a weird position where I'm sort of fighting them for their product or their purpose, because I do feel like we get a lot of things thrown at us. Someone that I'm close to that has a slightly different path will sometimes scoff a little bit about coaching. And I was like, yeah, but if you're trying to do something different, you're fighting not only your own insecurities and your own questions and your own trying to create it and figure it out, you're also fighting a huge amount of messaging that says, who are you to think you know anything?
Yeah.
And so that's where I feel like that it's really just it's a little bit of a breaker wall between you and the flood of negativity. And I think that might be part of why I do need to work for people that I really believe in, because it's a place that you have to really stand against the negativity that even sometimes comes into the person and say, no, I see this vision that you have. I see the impact you have. I see the way what you're doing makes a difference, and I'm here for it.
Yes.
And yeah.
That is money in the bank for me. That's pure gold. I know I've watched you do that with many, including myself, right? And one of the things I know that has been so valuable for me, my second mentor, Stan, years ago, he was that at a key time for me. And we all, as entrepreneurs with big visions and with the ability to have big impact too, right, in what we're doing, whatever that might be, we need to have that piece in the corner. It's interesting, Henry Ford actually identified his person as his wife. She was the one who did that for him, that kept him in the game, kept him going when he would inevitably hit those moments where he thought, this isn't possible, or this is too big, or I've gotten myself into a place and I don't know how to get out of. We need to have that person on the other side who also sees the vision. And that's one of the things you do bring to your clients again and again, is the ability to see that vision and hold the vision with us at the same time. I say us because, yes, I do have that benefit, and I'm going to take it right now today as being the one who gets to interview you in this podcast.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate it. And it's fun to hear because, like, I mean, I definitely, a part of me wonders, like, I believe this is true. It's been my experience that there's all this negativity we're fighting. And at the same time, it's not like I sit down and talk to people. How negative is the world today? Like, so hearing someone say, no, I think that's really true. And I work with other entrepreneurs and I hear the same challenges and say, okay, this thing is actually as insidious and uncomfortable as I perceive it to be. I appreciate that.
Yes, very much so. I appreciate it as well. And it's very, very needed. I think that's one of the benefits I would also probably add to what you're saying. When you take on a client, it's a very thoughtful process for you. It's not something that somebody's interested in working with you, just say yes. It's for you, first and foremost, it has to be something that's aligned for you in your values, in your wheelhouse, in your enthusiasm, in your excitement, right? Your passion. And so that takes you all over the map. I've seen you work with so many different types of businesses and people, and the opportunity to get to know them and to learn and grow yourself has been really amazing to watch. With that in mind, can you share a little bit more about how your success impacts the industry, the people that you're working with, and also the community in general?
I would say that my big dream in terms of business cartography, business as unusual, part of why I have the podcast, is that I'd love to be part of the community that's changing this narrative around what business is. I'm not the only one by far there. And that's one of the things I love about doing the podcast. I meet people every week who are equally passionate and inspired. And I'm beginning to believe that my theory that there are more of us that care about community, connection, and the planet than there are that don't is real. We don't have big megaphones, and we don't necessarily always find each other. So I think a lot of times folks are skittish because they have been open and been told, oh, that's not possible. And so they get a little bit more careful. And so finding so many people who are genuinely on that same page of really being committed to something that works, not just for them, not just for their industry, not just for their company, but for their community and for the planet. It's inspiring. And it's also, I just want to be one of the many people who is helping to create that shift. That would be the impact that I would see, is that business would stop being seen as separate from social justice, from ecological positive impact, from humanitarian needs, but that business would be seen as one of the many ways and aspects in which we address these powerful challenges that we're facing in the globe.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that. And I love that you put that into words, state it straight up and succinctly for all of us to reflect on again, because we are a part of this with each other for sure. And to think of ourselves as an island is problematic in how we're approaching business and our community both. And I think we're realizing, at least a lot of people are realizing that more and more. And I think that's where integrity gets to come in and play such a huge role, because people really want to know, we've always wanted to know who we're doing business with. And the business culture and climate in general has gone through its iterations. But what we do see is, even with globalization and how the internet starts to make discernment more and more difficult, we really still, at the core of it, want to see and know and understand the people that we are doing business with, who they are, what they stand for, and to try and make those decisions in as savvy a way as we possibly can. I want to actually go on to the personal side a little bit more. Can you share maybe about what in your life or your past set the stage for you to do this very unique approach in your business?
I obviously ask this question of people, and I've thought about it a lot, because I'm like, how does someone do this? People ask me. I actually had a networking meeting with someone a few weeks ago, and he was like, how do you find people that want to do this? Like, that's so weird. It really broke his brain that there were people out there that want to do business in a way that is symbiotic, right? And I don't think it broke his brain in a bad way, like he didn't like it. It broke his brain in a good way, like, oh, that's an option? Like, we could do that? We don't have to follow this script. I'm like, no, we don't. And so that was, and some of it, when I think about it, some of it is I just feel like it's my work. I do believe we all have something within us that we're here to do. And I don't mean in a grand superhero kind of weird way. I just mean that as part of the fabric of community and our lives, that there's something we are here to contribute or to show or to participate in. And for me, I feel like when I reflect upon my life, it has always been bridging things. And from the time I was very little, my parents were divorced, and my parents were very different people. And I was very sensitive to that. Yeah. And I was a redhead. I still am. And I had the biggest, brightest freckles you've ever seen, which people are not very kind about when they're young. And I was a tomboy. I really loved being active, and that was very upsetting to my mother. She wanted me to wear makeup and wear dresses. So I learned how to climb trees and play soccer in a skirt because I was like, okay, I guess I'll have to do both. And right. And I just, over the years, I kept realizing that there's a lot of either or in this world. I have to be on one side or the other. And when I came out, I was in a very conservative religion, and I came out as queer. And the same thing, I had to choose between this faith that I had chosen when I was 13 and what I came to realize about myself as a human in the world and how I connected to people. And it felt stupid and wrong to have to make a choice like that because they're both true. I was both at the same time. But neither of them were okay with me being both, really. At the time, to be queer and Christian was simply not acceptable. And I have since changed my beliefs. However, that was a very violent way to come to understand a part of who I was. And then when I realized, I looked around and I'm like, that happens in so many places. There are men who are very tender and they want to do tender things, not even necessarily wear women's clothing per se, although that as well, obviously, with lots of non-binary and trans people. But just even to be a man and to want to be tender, there's a risk to that. They have to choose a real man or are you tender? And I kept seeing that. And I was like, I just reject all of it. Yeah. I don't think that's true. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes one thing has to take lead. Like when my children were young, there were things in myself that I felt were needing to take a back seat so I could focus on that responsibility and that task. And so I do think there are times when you have to choose in yourself what gets prioritized. Yeah. There's not like a simple answer. And I also feel like the more that we violence ourselves, the more we violence others. And to start with saying, I'm both, and I see that this group that I'm in religiously doesn't accept the other part of me, so I've got to figure that out, rather than I reject this and shove it away and I sit amputated and uncauterized for the rest of my life. And so it started there in that very personal realm. And then I was the executive director for 2 different LGBTQ community centers, one in Tacoma, Washington, and one here in Boulder County. And realizing that similarly, I saw that in community as well, people were very wounded because they felt like they had to choose between their family and their personal happiness or expression. And it just, I was like, no, I don't want to be part of creating that. If you need support, I'm here to support you in your journey, whatever that is. And until and unless you're harming someone else, I think that there's that old, was that we learned that in civics class, right? Like I can wave my arm around in the air as much as I want to. My freedom to do that stops when I get close to your face.
Right.
And so understanding that there's, of course, boundaries and limits, and that I feel like there's a community respect we need to have. So it's a long way and it's a little bit rambly, but that commitment to me of it's more than just a bridge, because for me, it's about really accepting contradictory realities sometimes.
Yes.
And also not judging yourself for not being who other people think you're supposed to be. And then being in business with people who were innovative and creating and discovering and realizing that they had this instinct, even though they had done so much sacrifice. They left jobs, they left the corporate world, which is a lot. It feels like a lot of security. It's not as much as it feels like, but it still does, right? And then they're inventing all these systems and realizing like they're still violencing themselves in a certain way and feeling that sense of they're supposed to be. And I don't think they are. And as you know, I'm not against tools. I love tools. I love growth. I think we can always learn and grow. And until someone has fully really kind of realized into themselves the strength of their grounded alignment with their personal acceptance, or possibly core self-discovery. This is one of the reasons that it's very aligned for me. But once they have really found that, just so folks know that Carmell's program is called Core Self-Discovery. She really helps people get there. So for years ago, I talked to her about, I was like, I don't know that I want to help people get there, but once they're there, I want to help them be there.
And they need to get there too, right?
But once they get there, I got, because I don't know that I'm good at the first part. And I don't know that it's my work. My work is once you're there, I've got you. And I will help you. I'll help you find the right tools. I'll help you find the right path. I'll fight you when you've decided to give up on yourself, because I won't. And that first part is critical, in my opinion, to all the rest of the steps.
Getting to know ourselves. I thank you for that, by the way. Thank you. I appreciate that little reverse there. And I just want to also point out, you talked about being able to take on sometimes contradictory viewpoints, that this was the topic of your other podcast, Bicurean, right? That you did for quite a number of years, and then you set aside as you picked up Business as Unusual, and now you are relaunching Bicurean as well. And I want to just take this opportunity to mention that, because it's a really great opportunity for listeners if you are interested in where the rubber meets the road, or somebody who does what they say they're going to do and means what they say, that this is one of your great skill sets, that you're able to entertain these different narratives or these different stories, these different viewpoints that seem so completely contradictory in an engaged conversation without people being wrong, to actually get the conversation out on the table in the first place. The ones that we avoid like the plague, the ones that we won't touch with a 10-foot pole. I'm just going to keep going with all those little cliches, but and you have this amazing ability to do that. So if you're interested in taking a look at some of these big controversial topics engaged in a very curious way, I would recommend going back to the Bicurean podcast archives and pulling up some of those and taking a listen. And it's also going to give you a better understanding of Aicila and what you do and how you approach things in this world, where you come from with it. I also want to just mention too, because I have this little tidbit of information about you, and you didn't mention it, is I was always impressed. I think that you're looking at something and say, but why does it have to be either or? You went into comparative literature, and anybody who is an academic or has any kind of experience in academia, the art side of things, will understand that comparative literature is like the philosophy of English. It's so hard hitting. You don't go through comparative literature without getting grilled and grilling, and really grilling yourself as well into, why do you think that? Where does this come from? How did, really, can you hold this argument up? You got your chops here with comparative literature in this background. And I was always impressed by your ability to take very complex concepts, distill them down into their simplest components in order to be able to look at them and understand, and then to go in and do something with them, something effective with them. It doesn't matter whether it's a debate or if it's somebody's business or if it's a complex social justice issue. You have this ability and you use it all the time in everything that you do. So it's one of those superpowers that when you see it or you recognize somebody with it, I think it's important to point it out.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
I have another couple of questions here that I want to dive into with you as we're doing this. What's the most interesting problem that you've solved?
This is a challenge I run into regularly because I love working with creatives and innovators, and they are frequently suspicious, resistant, or outright rejecting of structure, which I completely 100% understand. I have so much empathy. I love that you feel called out by that. And then also a lot of artists have a fear of financial success, that somehow if they're financially successful, that they've sold out. And even when they're not mentally aware of it, I feel like I run into it. Those are the two challenges and I don't know necessarily that I solve them per se. I really work to provide a space where folks feel completely free to acknowledge that how they want to do things is how they want to do it. And I work to really meet them. So sometimes I have to tear my hair out because I'm like, wow, this is like we're running in circles. And for me, that's part of the trust building is I need to make sure that they feel clear and seen and supported and understand that actually, yes, I really mean it when I say we need to do it in a way that works for you. And that the only way to do that is to show them. I will do it in a way that works for you, even though it doesn't work for me. Let's see, can we get you some relief? Can we give you some space to breathe? And can we try this thing? Until we find the right mix that lets them really feel that sense of being true to themselves, not feeling like they're being caged by the structure, And also they're not dealing with the stress that it gives them to be fully resistant. Because once again, it's not either or, it's and. Most of the folks that are in that mindset have been bludgeoned with the idea that they're doing it wrong. They really need some time and space to recover from that so that they can step into something that feels true. That's ultimately my agenda, is to support them in finding a system and process that works for them, that feels true. And as an artist, for them to feel that sense of, I am allowed to have success. Like, one of the things I'll do is encourage them to think of resources instead of money. Because a lot of times they don't feel as resistant to receiving resources. Okay, we don't really need a lot of money. You need it to pay maybe rent or your mortgage or something. But you need resources. You need food. You need the ability to go where you need to go. So let's think about that. I'm not against people bartering, as long as they're bartering for something that they genuinely need and value, and that they feel that their work is being valued, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really where we're living. Money's an idea, and it's a symbol that we've all agreed to exchange. And so that's another way that I can really help the folks that I work with that are suspicious to a certain extent of that for a number of reasons. I named one, but there's others, that allows them to stop putting barriers in their way or to be afraid of it, which then lets them open up and see more of how they can achieve the success they need to be more secure in their day-to-day.
And that's beautifully stated. I'm just going to also point out that I've watched you a number of times in this interview so far. You show that juxtaposition between the either or and the and. And it's something that I do in my work as well. When people say but, and I say, let's say and instead, it opens up like within the subconscious and conscious mind in and of itself, right? It opens up a whole different series of opportunities and options when we look at just changing that one thing in our approach, right? In our languaging and the way that we think. And I think that right there is something that people could hear right now today and take away from what you're talking about is, oh, what if I actually change this either or thinking that I keep walking into my business with or into my problem solving with, and I shifted that to an and, what would happen as a result of that? I think that's a big bridge for people to cross, to shift out of that either or thinking as you keep talking about it.
When I talk about my business, business values, one of them I talk about is clarity. I have 3 values that I sort of lean into in this work. One is integrity, because it's the value that makes all other values possible. You have to be able to do what you say or acknowledge that you haven't and find a way to do it differently. Clarity, which is to be able to see what's actually there. And I feel like that's one of the reasons a consultant can be really helpful in general, is having somebody who's not already mired in the day-to-day, who can look at things and say, oh, and also, like you said, to ask some of those questions that are very natural for me, I've learned, but are not always the first questions people will ask, which is, why are we doing it this way? And sometimes there's a really great reason. I also learned that a long time ago when I started running the centers. Like, you come into a system and you look at things and you're like, that's weird. So then what I would do is I go try to do it. Like, okay, that's weird that they do it that way. And then I go to it. Oh yeah, this totally makes sense. Once you're in it, you're like, this is how you got to do it. And then because I was the director, I had the ability to say, and we're going to change the system because it doesn't have to be this hard, right? Like, and so it's that part. But the clarity is also, I think, a willingness to try, to say, I don't understand why. And that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that I don't get it. And I'm going to go see, because that's going to help me to be better as part of the system, is understanding why people are motivated to behave the way that they do. And then the last one is sustainability, which we've talked about a little bit, which people often assume is like ecological sustainability. Absolutely for that. I'm really also about the sustainability of the people doing the work.
Yes.
I want the entrepreneur, I want their employees, I want their contractors and myself to be doing things in a way that allows us to regenerate, to sleep, to have full other lives.
Yes. And I would say, I remember like some of my clients doing what would Carmell do? Like, they say that all the time. And you had given me a different version of this. Is it good for Carmell, right? As a person and as an entrepreneur, and in the work that I'm doing, is it good for Carmell? Whatever it is it good for me? I think that's really essential for people to be able to reflect on and to recognize. I love that. I'm going to just back up a little bit right there and say, first of all, the curiosity to really investigate. I think that's an essential thing, because all too often people come in with, oh, I've been given the power to to make decisions or to come and tell somebody what is and what isn't. And one of the things about you that you do when you work with people is you just go in and investigate first. You're very careful about that. I think that is unusual. I think there are people out there that do it, but I think they're more few and far between. To be an investigator first, to be highly curious first, to try things on and see, does this work? Even though it looks really odd to me, or it looks like it might be really clunky or ineffective, and then to try and realize, well, here it is working, or the reasons for it are still important. Maybe we can find a better way to do it, but I didn't understand those reasons before I actually investigated, right? That's so the way that you go about it. And the other part of that too is that you are actually getting to know the people when you do that you're working with and that you're going to be helping into greater success. And it allows you to be able to work with them as they are instead of as you are, which is a very different approach, because all too often consultants come in and they have their wealth of experience, and we want that wealth of experience, but they are more quick to say, this is what you need to do, without getting down inside the situation and getting to know the people that they're working with in the situation. Any kind of lasting change process or theory of change is going to require deeply understanding the human components, the people themselves, as much as you also understand the why that people have for doing what they're doing. So that's really, I love that. Okay, but what about a time when you were successful in achieving the mission that you have with your business in Bicurean?
Oh, I've had, I was like, I had a lot of successes. It's like, it's hard to pick one. That feels sort of weirdly self-aggrandizing to say. I've just worked with such amazing people. I think it's probably one of the most joyful successes I've had at different times with people is when I really see them step into that belief and that freedom. And it's funny because in the outside, the words we have are insufficient for it. Because once they trust themselves and really trust their own knowledge of themselves, then they can be so much more open to influence, because the part of them that is secure and grounded can't really be changed. And they're no longer afraid of that. They step into the work. And I love that experience when it happens, because then there's so much more we can do. I feel like it's like a little plant. You know, when you plant a seedling, it needs a lot of attention. And it needs all of the right things at the right time. And then as it gets hardier, like roses especially, the first couple of years to have a rose, there's like so much work. But then once they're rooted, they are almost impossible to kill. And they just grow and grow and grow. And it's amazing. And that's that. I love being there for that part where I'm helping them to tend their roots, right? And I just love that moment when they really ground in, and they're suddenly like, they're clear, and they're that road. And so then it doesn't matter. Then sometimes that means I stick around. Sometimes it means they're ready to move on to someone else. Most of the people I've worked with, I've stayed friends with because I'm so committed to them and so passionate that we talk a lot. and so, you know, I still get to see them and know them in their journey, even when I'm not always part of the next phase. But really, actually, to a certain extent, phasing myself out in that way is probably the success I like the most, even though, and it doesn't always mean, like I said, that I leave. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But that moment when they're like there, it's like, wow, that's so powerful. And they're just growing. And now who knows what's going to happen? It's not going to be a surprise for everybody.
I love that. We're so principles aligned on that we're,
yeah, I know.
we're engaging and working with people, whether it's individuals or groups or whatever we're doing, that we're always working to eventually become invisible to the people we're working with, so that it's all them on their own, which is quite a difference. I'm just going to point that out. That's quite a difference from a lot of what's in this industry, which is, if I've come in and helped you, then I want all of the credit for that. If you're successful, I want the credit for that success. And I think that it's important for us to recognize our successes, all of us, for sure.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think that your clientele and my clientele are benefited by knowing that they trust themselves so deeply, more than thinking, oh, this person helped me get to success.
I've ended lucrative contracts and when I've realized I can't help them. and it's not just that, it's not that they can't be helped. Let me be clear, it's that I can't help them. And I'm not here to waste their money or my time. Yep. Because there are people out there that I know I can help. And that's who I want to be working with. I want to find those people, and I want to be there in their process, and I want to help them launch. And I don't want to waste other people's time and money, and I don't want to waste my time with people I can see we're going to spin our wheels. And that doesn't mean that doesn't sometimes take time. I have people that I've worked with for several years. I've worked with you for more than a decade. Yep. But the way that we work together changes. Right. Because you get to new phases. You don't spin your wheels doing the same. There's no Tantalus here. We're not going back and forth with our leaky cup. And there are people that do that. And I don't have any issue with that, because sometimes that's what people need. They just need to be held in their wheel spinning. And there's no problem with that. It's just not my work.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that we had the chance for you to express that, because again, it goes to that level of integrity in the work that you're doing and the people who are the right fit for you. And I want you to talk about that a little bit more, who the right people are for you, but it really does make it clear when they're listening, that's the kind of person that I know I want and need to be working with. So who are the right people for you that you work with?
Oh my goodness. That is that is a question I am constantly asking myself. And I'm going to speak off the cuff here. We'll see how it goes. People who, so a little bit like I was saying before, like folks who have that general sense of what they know they're here for. And that's so imprecise, but like there's usually some awareness of that. I know I love to help people as a coach, or help people with marketing, or help people with writing books, whatever it is, right? They have some sense of that, and they feel stuck because they don't feel like systems really work for them. They're like, oh, I'm so disorganized. No, actually, you're not. You're not disorganized. You're trying to do things in a way that works for everybody else. That's what's happening. Mm-hmm. And they're genuinely willing and ready to invest in that. They recognize that there's a value to that process, that they're willing to put the time in, right? Because I can't do it for them. Right. I can do it with them, but I can't do it for them, because most of the people I work with are thought leaders, creative entrepreneurs, innovators. They are a core part of what they're offering. And therefore, they have to be part of how the process works. And they also have to learn. So, because a lot of times they work in their own space, they've had success that they weren't necessarily expecting. And suddenly they're bigger than they expected to be. And they start seeing that the things they were doing before aren't working quite right. Mm-hmm. And I like to say that it's because what it used to be was your entire administrative staff was in here in your head. When you had to send an email, you told the email person in your head to do it, and then they went and did it. But then when you get a VA and you say, hey, go send an email, you think you've given them all the information they need, and you have not. Because the internal email assistant knew a lot more intuitively. And so it's another thing that I've helped people do is I'll help them develop the standard operating procedures and communication methods to work with more people so they can delegate, because they don't understand that they need to give more information. And sometimes it's they don't want to be controlling. And it's like, you're not being controlling, you're being helpful. But they're so used to being very like resistant to that and very innovative that they don't understand that actually there's lots of people out there who really appreciate that kind of specificity. And so once again, that bridging piece. So people that are looking to expand, that have gotten stuck, that maybe feel a little discouraged. They believe in themselves, they believe in their product, they believe in their service, and they aren't quite sure how to take it to the next step. And that's the other thing I do. I go look for tools in other people. It's not just me. Like I work with folks and do the business cartography. Like I said, it's a really great place to start. It'll give you some of those things. And one of the other things I do is I've really worked to build a network of other professionals. I do a lot of observation, and I get a sense of who this person is and what they need. And then I do a little shortcutting for them and help them find a tool or a person that will be more aligned than just going to a Google search.
Can I just say it's not a little shortcutting, like it's a big shortcutting. Let's just be really honest about that. I've watched you do that. I've experienced the effects of you doing that for me and in my business, and it's really phenomenal. What about some advice that you've received that's influenced you, or the way that you approach what you're doing that you took that's made a difference?
Well, when I was younger, one of the things that my parents would say a lot is there are three sides to every story: your side, my side, and the truth. And I feel like the more that I recall that, with a lot of the things that you're talking about, is one of the things that I think really keeps me present to, I don't actually know anything. I think I know what's going on. That doesn't mean I do. And to really remember to stop and look and be curious and investigate so that I can actually show up in a way that's genuinely helpful to myself, to the people I work with, and to the businesses that we're trying to make the best they can be.
I love that. I think that's also a really key piece of advice for where we are in the world right now, right? Mm-hmm. There's yours, mine, and the truth. Three different sides to every story. How do people get in touch with you?
Well, I have an email list. I usually send out information about the podcast, honestly, because it's my favorite thing in the whole world. I don't know why. I'm obsessed with podcasts and minions. And that's just how it is. I send out an email about once a week with podcast information. I have fantasies of sending out information with little tips and tools. So it might be that might happen once every month or something. I haven't decided. I give myself a little room. I'm very structured about many things in my business. So that's something I let myself just follow my nose on. So, so if you're really interested, join my email list, and that's the best way. You can follow me on social media everywhere, Bicurean, Bicurean. And I'm always happy to email, chat. If you're curious about what I'm up to, I have a little scheduling link on my website, Bicurean.com. You can meet for 15 minutes and just talk about what's going on. I'm always happy to give people a little bit of time. I believe in relationships as part of business. It takes time to get to know someone. I don't feel like anybody's going to listen to my podcast, go to my website, and hire me, because the amount of trust they have to do this work is so high. They have to have time to know who I am, what I stand for, get to know me in different ways. That's the other reason that I created the business cartography packages. They're much smaller, more limited, project-based. They have a very clear, specific outcome. When you're done, you'll have a list of your business priorities, the most important next step, at least one, usually up to 3 ideal client profiles, and some services to consider offering in your business so that you have some very clear action items. You have a sense of what it is to have someone who's interested in the whole ecosystem and not just one specific thing, and who thinks you're part of your ecosystem.
Yeah, I have to say the business cartography pieces, right, I have done on my own, trying to do those on my own. It's hours and hours and hours of work, and just this headache from being inside my business so deeply, it's hard to see the forest for the trees. And so it's incredibly helpful and powerful to have that little business tesseract, if you will, that actually shortens the curve so significantly and gives you real, actionable, immediately usable information for your marketing, for your messaging, for your business systems and setup, like all of that. I think that's like a no-brainer right there for me. Now that I've experienced it and being able to share that with other people, I'm glad I get to be on this side of it, asking you questions and having you tell about it. It's fantastic. So I just want to spell that out again: Bicurean, Bicurean.com. And also, what's the email link? What is that?
It's there. If you just go to the website, this little pop-up, you can get the scoop.
You got it. It's all there. Great. Mm-hmm. Is there anything, like, as we're kind of wrapping this up, anything that just stands out that you want to be able to really have people walk away with, that they're thinking in their minds, or that they can feel clearly leaving our podcast today? Anything that just stands out?
You've got this.
I
appreciate you taking your time to do this with me. It feels weird. I hope people like it. I don't know. And thank you, everyone, for listening. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for letting me have the honor of actually doing this on the other side with you in this podcast. I'm grateful to have the opportunity for other people to see you more clearly, because you've been on this side of it so much, and you bring so much of yourself into everything that you do. It's so sincere and so authentic.
So it was weird but fun, and I appreciate you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us, being here. We're so happy that you caught us this time.
We'll see you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
I hope you enjoy the show. I love making it. If you did enjoy it, consider hopping over to the review portion of the platform you listen on and letting other people know about it. Or share the episode or the entire show with a friend or subscribe to the show. Definitely reach out, get on my newsletter, follow me on social media, and let me know what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see in the future. Well, we love our guests. Appearance on the Business as Unusual podcast or any Bicurean consulting production is for information purposes only and is not to be considered an endorsement of their business practices, or character. Please properly vet anyone you find through this podcast and generally before you do any business with them. Thank you for listening.